Hey, everybody. The name is Chase Clymer. I'm a co-founder over at Electric Eye, where we create Shopify-powered sales machines from strategic design and development decisions. I'm also the host of Honest Ecommerce, a weekly podcast where we interview online store owners and share honest, actionable advice to increase their sales and grow their business. I'm a terrible golfer and an avid Magic the Gathering player.
Well, it could have been the reverse. It could have been like you're an excellent golfer and really bad at Magic.
Yeah, I would prefer that.
That might be a little bit more lucrative, right? Well, I wanted to dive right in. I'm really curious. You had actually shared with me before we started the podcast a little bit of a little origin story and history of how you've developed with the agency. But rather than lead it too much, I'm just gonna like leave it back over to you and kind of walk us through the story of how you've developed the marketing for the agency. And this is a little bit of like, cheating because obviously you're a marketer, so you're able to think of it from that point of view. But for people listening that are founders and really kind of thinking about like, okay, I'm at this point in my business building and I'm trying to figure out how to lock in the marketing, kind of walk us through like how that developed because it seemed like it kind of evolved pretty organically over time for you.
Yeah, it evolved very organically, and it just evolved. And it was honestly from a result of investing in myself, reading books, and just doing things that they said, seeing what worked for us. But I'll take you back in time, almost 7 years now. Was when we kind of accidentally started the agency. But even before that, when I met my business partner when I was in a band. We had a record deal. We were touring the country. We were having a lot of fun, but that did not pay the bills, right? So I was doing a lot of freelancing. I was doing a lot of marketing, things I could do from a laptop on the road. I was doing a digital nomad thing before anyone thought it was cool. And in doing that, I picked up a lot of skills. I learned a lot about strategy and paid ads. And when my business partner left his job, he was getting into freelancing and whatnot, and he was making a bunch of mistakes. So I was helping him out just from like the knowledge I had, and it slowly became him and I were collaborating on all of these Shopify projects. And the next thing we knew, we accidentally had a business. Before that, I kind of had like a Me Too agency where it was just like, sure, I can do that, and I would say yes to everything. And by agency, I mean it was me with a business name. I had no employees. It was nothing else. And the marketing that we had behind that was nothing. The advertising behind that was nothing. It was very terrible, right? And it's why it didn't really work out. But once we kind of started to do, me and Sean started to do these things together, and we got more active in specifically the Shopify ecosystem. Some things started to click as far as actually, getting things going and learning how to sell before marketing actually. What the heck it was that we were doing. So origin story similar to a lot of other, I would say, service industry people is they accidentally build a job for themselves. And then it kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate. And I'm curious, you said about the Me Too agency thing. I've worked for an agency, but I've never tried to brand myself as an agency or position myself. Like when I was doing pure copywriting, coaching, like it's always kind of like a freelance thing. Tell me just sort of, to a little bit more context, like what in your mind is the difference between you just working as a freelancer or as a creative versus like branding yourself as an agency? Or is it just like you said, you have the business name?
Well, back then it was like kind of an FU to someone. I applied for a job right after the band thing. I was like, screw it, I'll go actually get a job at this big agency here in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from. And I did the first interview, I did the second interview, things went great, and then they never called me back. And I was just lucky enough to know someone that could get an answer for me as to what was going on here. And they were like, yeah, this guy will work here for 3 months and quit and start his own agency. Like, you can just tell it by his history and what he's up to and his, like, his attitude. And I was like, well, I guess we won't wait 3 months. Boom. And then that's like why I started the first agency. But outside of that, like, this was me being a young entrepreneur and thinking I needed to be bigger than what I was. Like, you needed a name, you needed a 1-800 number, you needed to have all these services, you needed to do you there are a lot of there's a lot of things you can do with a business. There's a lot of busy work you can do with a business, right? And none of it is selling and doing what you are trying to sell for your clients. I am telling you right now, I wasted so much time, energy, and money trying to build this thing into something bigger than what it was at the onset, which was just wasteful. I've got a friend who has a very successful influencer agency, and he doesn't have a website because it's not a priority. So it's just to tell you, like, don't some people just play at doing business, and at the end of the day, business is selling, which is powered by marketing. But it's, you have to sell your thing, and until you're selling it to people, you don't have a business, and that's going to be maybe the takeaway from this conversation.
No, it's it. It's just the fundamental right there, right? And it's funny because it's, I think the first conversation I can think of there where the agency launch was basically a revenge play,
Yeah,
right? So maybe we'll add that to a list of wrong reasons to not start a business, is to get revenge on the place that wouldn't hire you, right?
exactly. And I wasn't even going after their clients. They're like they got acquired by IBM, and they do like internal stuff for them now. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, and I like your point too, and I think it really relates to the branding thing, but particularly like how a company or an individual who has their own business approaches messaging, right? Because there is this thing that I see a lot, I've seen it for years, for 20 plus years, where you'll have somebody who starts on their own and they want to make it seem really big, right? So they give themselves a fancy title or they do whatever, and they just have all this stuff that's like extraneous on their website or wherever however they market themselves. And in the process, they wind up washing over what might be their greatest strength, right? Because now they're the ones that are going to be focused. They're the ones that are going to be like working hand in hand with the customers or the clients, and that might be their strength. And yet they don't have any of the strengths of the big organization, right? So they're trying to message around like this big, all these capabilities, let's say, that they might really not have. And so it's a little dovetailing into, like, we could talk a little bit about messaging and how you approach that. But what are your thoughts on like finding that right kind of size for yourself at the beginning and being comfortable with that and really leaning into the advantages of being small at the beginning?
Yeah, so I meant to circle back to that on my own, actually, which was like, I wanted to be this big thing, and these days my opinion is, why, like, you don't have to do that. You don't need to do that. I even talk to entrepreneurs on the phone all the time these days, freelancers and stuff. We partner with a lot of people at the agency, and often talk about like what they're up to, what their plans are, what their growth plans are, and people are like, oh well, I guess the next step is I got to start an agency. And it's like, no, you don't. Why do you need to do that? There's this idea that if you're not growing, you're being complacent. And there's also this weird idea about lifestyle businesses being like taboo, or something like that. And it's like, no, none of that is true. Let's be real. No one listening to this podcast probably will be the next Facebook. Like, that's just not happening. But building $100 million company is probably realistic for some of you. A $10 million company is realistic for half of you. And building $1 million company is, if you have the patience and the persistence, anyone can build $1 million company. It's not that hard. So you can even get there like almost freelancing. There's a lot of stuff on the internet right now about people building one-man agencies and having $1 million agencies at that size. It's just a freelance shop. Like, let's be real, with productized services, but you can get there. So size doesn't necessarily indicate value to certain clients. I think that I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and a great podcast is Built to Sell Radio by John Warlow. And there's an episode where this guy had this consultancy that was very niche in this weird, I want to say it was healthcare and sales, like just things that have zeros on the end, a bunch of them. But this consultancy, the way they value priced worked for the industry, and like the revenue per head was like something insane, like $750,000 in revenue per consultant. It was definitely a highly sales first organization, but that just goes to show that like you can numbers don't necessarily have to equate to the revenue that's coming in, and it's almost a limiting belief.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted us to put a point on that too, because I think it does influence when anybody's considering how they're actually representing their business, right? It's like the ability and the willingness and the comfort with being, authentic. And I mean, in a real way, not like, authentic marketing, but like really saying, this is who I am or who we are. And this is what we're great at. And this is what we love doing. And this is who we love working with. And to that point, I want to go back in time a little bit more and go back toward as you started to kind of hone in on your, what turned out to be really your niche there with Shopify, right? So at the beginning, what were the services that you were providing as this kind of like, kind of generic or Me Too agency at the beginning?
Oh, well, that agency isn't even when I wasn't even doing Shopify back then. So that thing was kind of just like it was a freelance shop where I was kind of just doing everything under one umbrella and like learning how taxes worked. Then enter Sean, my business partner, and we started tag team on all these Shopify projects. And back then it was like he was kind of doing these design dev things and I was coming in and doing kind of marketing and advertising. And it kind of just got we hit a sweet spot with Facebook ads at the right time, and we were basically doing like, it was almost like a full service agency, doing email, paid ads, and we were doing like design dev on Shopify. And it was just clients were getting confused sending PayPal invoices to whomever, so we like just kind of made a list of metal songs that we liked, and we ended up picking Electric Eye, which is a Judas Priest song, as the agency name, and kind of took it from there. And at the beginning, it was not it was more for like, I would say the first month it was only there to make it easier to talk about the mutual clients that we had together, and him and I were like still doing freelancing stuff. But once we like made the name and it made it easier to talk about as like, this is the thing we do and these are some of the services that we offer to kind of people in the Shopify ecosystem. And more specifically at that point, it was just e-commerce, but we still weren't saying no to stuff, and our messaging didn't really like wasn't narrowed down on e-commerce, but we were getting a lot of traction in the e-commerce space. And so once that became apparent, Sean and I kind of had a conversation. We're like, I think we were onto something here. So that's when we kind of stopped pursuing freelance opportunities and kind of just let any clients that we had kind of just like run in the background and not really necessarily pursue anything outside of like what this agency opportunity kind of became. And so once we kind of went all in on the agency, like a month or two in, we quickly realized that a lot of our opportunity was just in this e-commerce ecosystem. It's where we were getting a lot more specialty. It's where we were finding a lot of success with the advertising and stuff that we were doing for clients. So we started to kind of double down there. And then quickly we realized we hated all other platforms other than Shopify. So this necessarily wasn't a play motivated by like anything other than pure laziness of we don't want to write any more SOPs. So we kind of niched down more into Shopify. But to Shopify's credit, back then we launched the agency and we were Shopify experts from day one because we had migrated so many brands over to Shopify and we had been working with the Shopify team for so long. And back then they had an amazing partnerships team. We had an amazing partner rep that worked with us for so many years, and they were instrumental in the growth of our agency and in the reason we tied ourselves to kind of their horse, which was we had a champion at Shopify that would answer our questions, give us leads. Like we had like all this opportunity there. So that was like definitely something in our corner that made niching down kind of into just Shopify as a technology vertical so much easier. And then in doing that, it opened up all these other conversations because this analogy I'm probably going to use more than once today, but it's like, think about if your roof is leaking, you're not going to call a general contractor. You're going to call a roofer. Same thing. If your sink is leaking, you're going to call a plumber, right? Now, these brands have Shopify stores. They want a Shopify expert. So it just allowed our messaging to resonate with these merchants just a little bit better. But we only really scratched the surface with niching down there, kind of from a vertical perspective. But I can see you smiling, so I'm sure you've got some follow-up questions.
Oh, I'm smiling and I have like many things to unpack with you on that. And the first thing I want to do is just take a little bit of a step back and some people listening might there we've all heard of Shopify, but might not be like super familiar with what sets Shopify apart or what specifically like what type of people run
Yeah.
those kinds of businesses. So just in like a couple of 3 sentences, could you just quickly describe it for people, give them a little idea?
Yeah, I love being on a podcast where it isn't like the audience that I typically talk to. This is great. So Shopify is an e-commerce platform that allows you to sell products online. It is fully customizable. There's pretty much no limitations to it, but it is what's called is a managed solution. So Shopify takes care of your server, your payment processors, your security stuff for a fee every month. Um, Now that would be kind of counter to something that's like more open source or like a self-managed solution like a BigCommerce or a Magento. At the end of the day, it's something that most e-commerce brands can utilize. Like there are pros and cons to using a managed solution versus a self-hosted solution versus a fully custom solution. There are reasons to use them all. There are reasons why some might be better for your opportunity. To me, for 99% of businesses that are selling direct to consumer, it is probably the best option for them unless they're doing things or want to do things that are a little against just the how you typically want to sell something online. And I'm someone that, just because I'm a giant fan of Shopify doesn't mean everything needs to be solved by Shopify. That old, like, just because you have a hammer doesn't mean everything's a nail. Like I tell people all the time, like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it's like, go use this thing instead. But for the types of merchants that we like to work with, it is usually the best option.
And so these merchants, because you said that the Shopify platform would really be appropriate for most e-commerce. So am I guessing right that it could be anything from a solo business all the way to like maybe a larger, not large enterprise organization, but like a
No,
company
there's enterprise organizations on Shopify these
they
days.
do. Got it.
Yeah, they
So
just
you're
opened up the top end. So these days they got this thing called Shopify Components. And the first brand they launched it with was Mattel, which is a publicly traded toy company. They to even have conversations with Shopify about that product offering, you have to be doing 500 million in sales a year for them to consider talking to you. So they are going after the enterprise market quite heavily these days. But there are some huge brands on there that you've heard of, like Kim Kardashian's brands are on there. Fashion Nova, which is like the biggest fast fashion brand in the world, they're on there. Staples in Canada runs their site off of e-commerce, off of Shopify. So it definitely, you can use it for larger businesses, but Shopify definitely made their mark with their marketing around arming the rebels was their concept that they coined a few years ago, which was this idea of like empowering entrepreneurs wherever they are to build their own business and change their life. So you do have a lot of smaller businesses utilizing Shopify, mom and pop stores coming online. You saw a big rise of that during the pandemic, where there's a lot of adoption of Shopify during the pandemic, and some solutions were built and released very quickly to help service needs that were happening during the pandemic from Shopify. So it really runs the gamut of like who can use this tool, and just like everyone can use a hammer doesn't necessarily make you a carpenter.
it's a good analogy. And in that range, is there a particular, range within that you focus on as far as who you feel are your best target market within that?
Absolutely. These days we have an answer to that, but years ago we didn't. These days it's usually the seven-figure merchant. So for people that don't want to pull out a calculator, that's like $1 to $10 million. Um, while
That
that's
would
like,
be in total revenue, right?
yes, yes, and most merchants that we're working with are direct to consumer first. Um, Now, with that being said, we work with brands way larger than that and some brands smaller than that. But that's usually the sweet spot of where we're usually for our like the flagship products that we have. Like that's usually where it resonates the most.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to actually highlight that a little bit is because, we were talking about niching down, and I'm a big fan of that. And but in your particular case, you have these kind of it's a little bit of a crossover, right? So you're not just niching down on the size of a company, but also on the specific platform that they use. So I think for people listening, it gives them a little bit of idea of how they can start to frame this for themselves, right? You don't have to just be, in your case, we just do Shopify, right? There's also different ways to slice that up so that you're competing in the area that not only do you feel, most equipped to succeed in, but also that maybe is that you're most interested in doing at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, David C. Baker is an amazing author, and he's got a fantastic book all about positioning that I'm drawing a blank on. I have his other book here, so I wonder if it's got it listed somewhere. But it's all about positioning, and positioning is this concept of niching down into like certain subsegments. And the tighter your positioning, the more you can charge, to be honest, and the more you are valuable to people, because at the end of the day, people want to know that you've solved that problem before. And this, we're talking a lot about service businesses right now, and maybe even agency, but like this goes beyond that. Uh, you just, if you can prove that your solution has solved that problem before multiple times, people are willing to pay for that certainty, as opposed to someone that doesn't have like that uh track record to back up their offer.
Yeah, and also on a practical level, like, unless you have an unlimited budget, which none of us do, you can only reach a certain part of a market anyway, right? You can only spend so much money or make so many phone calls or send so many emails, whatever it is, right? So they might as well have something in common than just be kind of generic across the board. I wanted to mention too what you said before about trial and error. Those are magic words for me, and I think a lot of times people think that we all have to start with something, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
start with some kind of reasonable strategy. Otherwise, you're not going to take any action. But I think what a lot of people mistakenly believe, and this has not been the case in my experience, that this is actually true, is that their first or second or even third strategic kind of idea of what they're going to do is going to be the perfect one. Sometimes they get lucky, right? But a lot of it is trial and error. And I'm curious, as you were starting, especially, I mean, you mentioned that you had this rep at Shopify, this partnership that was really useful or very helpful to you. But as you were kind of going through this trial and error, like, how were you getting your clients? Like, what tactics were you using specifically to start generating conversations that led to clients?
Oh, this is going to go down a whole other rabbit hole. So about, I'm going to go back in time. The agency is going on 7 years old. So let's go back 4 years, right? During this time, we are honestly living off of word of mouth, right? Which is 99% of the time is going to be responsible for the majority of business that a service business gets is word of mouth or referrals, right? And we were heavily investing in partner relationships, so Shopify for one, but we were also getting leads through the email softwares that we were using, through the Facebook actually itself. We had a good partnership with there for a while. And there's other kind of apps and stuff in the ecosystem that we were partnering with we'd get leads that way. And now at this point, our website was still pretty generic, even though it said Shopify specifically. We had other service offerings. Like, it was just a lot of things that also, like, here's one limiting factor, was like, you got to be on Shopify. So a lot of that with inbound leads, um, I can kind of be like really blunt here. Like, it doesn't matter what your website says. If it's inbound from a referral and you have a conversation with them, they're already like sold on you as a person because it was a referral. Referrals are worth their weight in gold. So from a messaging perspective, it was still like blah. It didn't really matter. But from a you know, how were we getting business perspective, the website was hardly like the factor that was bringing stuff in, or the messaging.
Yeah, and the messaging is more than just what's on a website, right? The messaging is like the brand and the way that your customers and clients relate to what you do, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like the messaging gets passed through conversations to other people who then become referrals. Um, and ultimately I always go back to like the positioning messaging kind of combination where if you know who you're serving and you know the problem that you're solving for them and why it matters to them, the messaging, it's never easy, but it's almost like what you said. It's like it doesn't matter if they go to your website or not. It's that through line, it's that theme that makes it through to how people describe you, right?
Yeah, and so here's something I struggled with when I was a younger entrepreneur, and it was this concept of niching down. And I thought that it was like an all or nothing approach, and I needed to just overnight change my website to say I do X for Y by way of Z, and turn down all other opportunities. And like that is such a binary way to look at this. And I'm here to say, don't do that. That is dumb. What you can start to do is you can, and this is something that a lot of other people in the space, like I'm not trying to become known as like an agency operator expert, but I have ingested a lot of material by those folks. And it's like you should try everything when you're a younger company. Find what you like, find what you're good at, find what is profitable, kind of is a lot more important. And then start to identify what makes those things, why do you like those things, what are the commonalities there, and then you can start to slowly niche into the direction that you want to go. You could even, maybe you even know where you want to be, um but you don't have, it doesn't have to be like overnight. It is an iterative evolution to get there, because you don't want to alienate your inbound revenue stream. Unless you're just absolutely crushing it doing that one thing already, then go for it. But if you look at your client mix and what you're doing for them as far as like services, if it's all over the place, like, oh no, like maybe start to wait until it starts to wait in one direction. But actually, maybe take that back. Your service could be whatever. It could be, though, that you're just amazing at doing all of that stuff for roofers, right? And that's like the angle you're taking is like because if you start working with the same type of client over and over again, you get inside industry knowledge of how marketing affects that particular industry in certain ways and what will and won't work. And that is more valuable than, again, a general person that doesn't like only work with roofers. So you can niche down in like client types, into verticals, into technology specifications. And then, even further than that is if you start to do it like 2 or 3 different times. So it's like I do paid ads for plumbers in big cities. Like that's all I work with. That is going to resonate so well with your ideal client.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a couple of thoughts there. One is a big part of this puzzle is what you like doing, right? Because if you're doing something just because, let's say you've been operating for a couple, 3 years and you have different types of clients and you look at one type and you go, those are the most profitable, however you want to, define that. It could be just purely financial or whatever. But you don't really like working with them and you don't like doing those types of projects, or you don't like whatever it is. That's going to be kind of like a hard decision to make, right? Because you might have a different niche within that might not be as developed yet, but that's like your favorite part of the day. So as we kind of start to wind down a little bit, could you give some advice on like somebody who's kind of on the fence, right? They're they feel a little resistance to niching down at all, right? Because they're like, I don't know which the right direction to go in. I'm afraid of saying no to anybody, especially when the economy gets a little rocky or people get a little scared. So any kind of parting words of advice on how you would kind of filter through that and start to make those specific decisions?
Well, first, don't say no to anybody. Like it's your company. You can break all the rules you want, right? Niching is a result of better messaging and positioning, because then you'll start to see more of those similar clients come through the door. And that's when you'll have those things kind of displayed on your website, and it will kind of appeal strictly to your ideal client profiles. So you'll start to see more and more of that specific thing come through the door. But like when you're just getting started, only say no to things that you don't want to do. Like you still need to pay the bills, you still need to keep your lights on. But know that at the end of this journey, you want to get to start doing certain things. So maybe like start to push those types of clients into the direction of the things you want to do just a little bit. But like another thing is when it comes to building a successful service business, once you get the right clients coming in, um, you need to start playing with what your offer is to them a little bit. Uh, and you'll start to learn that they care, like there'll be commonalities in what they care about and not necessarily be with what you care about. And a great book on this is $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy. And basically, you can have the same exact deliverables, and you can talk about those deliverables in a multitude of different ways. And one of them will resonate 10 times more with your ideal clients than the rest of them, but it's the same service. And it could be even for more money. So you should always, you should know what you want to deliver to the client as far as like technical like deliverables, but you should talk about the value behind it and the name of the service and the positioning and all that stuff a little bit differently each time you pitch it, and you'll start to see how faster you close and how much money you can close for change by iterating upon that offer.
And just so I make sure that when we talk about offer, people really understand, because it can get confused. Well, what's the difference between an offer and your messaging or your homepage, whatever? When you say offer, can you give like a specific example?
Yeah. So this would be in my industry. We have two offers. We are rebuilding your website, or we're doing an ongoing retainer, right? When it comes to those estimates and proposals, we've got names for certain things that are a little more branded to us, and the way that we position those things for the value generated for our clients. We put a lot of work into these things, and these things have been iterated upon, over hundreds of pitches over the last 7 years. And so we can definitely highlight what matters to our clients as far as outcomes go, and then draw that back to the investment that they're going to make and the upside that they can potentially get from working with us.
Basically, it's a way to combine the different elements of messaging, like your value proposition, with the specifics of what they're going to get, the impact that's going to make, the cost, all those different kind of like specific elements, right?
Yeah, and here's a really generic like example, right? So like a lot of people, development shops, agencies that they'll just sell time for money, right? And so that is a commoditized offer. It's like, we'll sell you 20 hours at $100 an hour. And if you're at $100 an hour, raise your rates. And so, that's the offer, right? That doesn't appeal. That doesn't talk about the features of this opportunity, the benefits of working with you. There's no outcome that you place this to. There's no, where you could take that same offer and you could switch it over to something that's more consultative or strategic. And it's like, for $5,000 a month, we'll work on whatever the hell you want us to work on, one thing at a time. That's the offer. And so instead of, commoditized, you have 20 things, and then when they're gone, and it resets every month. Now it's like, we're constantly working for you as a partner. And that's just like a very generic example. You could also do like outcome based kind of deliverables, where it's like, people oftentimes want to, especially on the internet, they want to build some feature or functionality on their website because it has a core purpose of doing like some business goal. And so if you can align the outcome to the business goal, it's like, okay, for $25,000, we're going to work until that goal is achieved. And now that is a lot more enticing to your customer than, we've got 20 business units to work on this thing until it's done. I don't know when it's going to be done. So offer is probably like, I would say 401, 501 level when it comes to this stuff. It's very hard, and you get involved there. It's a rabbit hole.
But it does go back to the mindset of trial and error, right? Where you can
Yeah.
start with what you think is the most enticing, which might be right? But I've rethought my own offer, as a freelancer, a coach, as a copywriter, like so many times I can't even count, because there's so many elements. Like you brought up a couple of points about, you could do you're paying per hour, you're paying for a flat fee, you're paying for the result. Like there's all these different dynamics that you can include. and there's no rules to it. It's another way to also differentiate yourself from other people, right? So if there's a million agencies out there, or copywriters or whatever you're doing, the specifics of how you deliver that, which it's like your business model in a way, is another way to really differentiate that. Um, Last part, give people your best advice on how to deal with how you've dealt with trial and error, and like your mindset, and just like how you approach it, so that you're not constantly driving yourself crazy when things don't work right away.
Okay, I've got. I actually had a note to bring this up, and thank you so much for reading my mind. So there is basically, when you're talking about pitching an offer, it's almost like pitching a product, and you want an MVP approach here. And so the minimum viable is sell the thing before you actually have it all done. Have the broad strokes done, and go and try to sell it to people and get feedback from them. Because the worst thing is investing 20 hours in building this beautiful thing that you think is what they want, and then nobody buys it, right? So instead, you pitch it to people, understand kind of what you want to deliver, and have it be a little more fluid, and you can change it and be okay with change. And if people are asking questions you don't have the answer for, turn it back on them. Be like, well, what would you want to see here? And have them help you build the best product that you can build to offer to your clients. That's the way to do it, like literally. And if it doesn't work, just move on. Like, not every idea is a winning idea, and you need to be able to find out when ideas are winning ideas. A great book about that specifically is what is it? I'm listening to it right now. $100 Million Businesses by, here, I'm pulling it up on Libby real quick. I got 3 books to pitch too. Another book I want people to listen to. This is all about pricing and fees and the weird stuff that you can do there. Is Value-Based Fees by Alan Weiss. That is a fantastic book about pricing. Another book that you should listen to or read is Pricing Creativity. That is a great book. And then the last one that I was just talking about that I drew a blank on is Ready, Fire, Aim. That is all about pitching offers and failing fast and moving on at the first level of the book. That's a fantastic read as well. And if you haven't noticed, all of this stuff that I've learned and I'm talking about is just from reading books that are readily available for, a lot of these I get from the library for free.